Batman Arkham Shadow. How good is it really? And should you play it? Let's dive right into it. Batman Arkham Shadow is an action-packed VR game that really takes your virtual reality experience to the next level. And it is important to know that this game is a meta exclusive. That means you will need a Quest headset like the Quest 3 or Quest 3S to be able to play it. And your experience itself might also slightly differ depending on the one that you use. But we will go into more detail about those changes later on in this review. So let's start with the overall story of this awesome VR game. Now firstly, there won't be any major spoilers here, so that you can be sure to still enjoy it for yourself if you haven't already. And all the gameplay that you see will be from the early tutorial areas only. Now, the game itself is made by none other than Camouflage, which is the studio that is known for their successful game of Iron Man VR. But with Batman, it is now finally a full title instead of just a short experience, where in it you will be going on some investigation through the Gotham sewers in search for the so-called Red King and his followers, while they are trying to put their plan in motion known as the Day of Wrath. And while it is set before Asylum, Arkham Shadows can perfectly be played without any prior knowledge to the series. While on the other side, some long-term fans may be pleased to find a few references and Easter eggs throughout it. But even more important is that the Arkham Shadow story is making use of a continuous campaign. So you are not just simply choosing your mission from a menu, but instead, you are a regular fixture inside this world. So beyond just some flashback sequences and the official opening, there are no breaks in the narrative flow, making the story progression as smooth as it can be. But let's talk about the gameplay, because directly when you start up your game, you get the choice to choose between easy, normal, or hard mode. And this all depends on the difficulty that you want to take on. But unless you have already played through it once, I would probably recommend just starting with normal. But once you do get into the game, you will be quickly introduced to the Gotham world and its many great interactions you can have within it. This means you can grab and throw a lot of objects, while the surroundings itself all look really great. But the coolest thing is probably your amazing batsuit. Here, you'll find some insane features like smoke bombs in your left arm, to even the high-tech vision goggles that you can turn on by pressing the trigger button while holding your controller close to your headset, and even getting a cool looking batarang straight from your chest. And it is thanks to all these interactions that feel so smooth that it adds a lot of immersion to the gameplay as well. Another great example is that to be able to glide, you will have to grab your cape on both sides and open it up. Or you can even use it in combat by using one side and slash it in the face of the enemy. And all those features are just the tip of the iceberg, with a lot of new ones being added throughout your progress to the story. But another great feature that you will be using a lot during your playthrough is known as the map function, because here you can see the location of the objects or mission that you are on, as well as your own place on the map within it. And this makes it a lot easier to orientate yourself, since sometimes you can easily get lost within those Gotham sewers. Besides, you will also find your skill tree here in the tab above, with simple explanations for each one you have unlocked so far. So if you ever forget a combo or cool move you wanted to pull off, you can always find it back here. And the same goes for the next tab, which is an overview of some cool collectibles, with things like red statues and radios that you will find throughout the game. And some of these don't only bring some extra story to the game, they can also turn into a goal to find all of them for those hardcore completionists, because the game itself will probably take you about 15 hours to complete, depending on how much side stuff you are doing, of course. So it is important to keep in mind that it might not be on the same scale as some other console games, but still, it can be considered a big title when compared to the average for VR, which gets us to the performance and graphics, with it being clear to see that this game looks absolutely stunning in virtual reality. This goes all the way from the basic menus to the entire overworld you play in, even so much so that it is hard to believe that this is running on a standalone headset. And all that while prioritizing the frame rate at a constant pace, even in the most intense moments of battle. Now of course, there are also some structures and objects that have some more flat graphics, but this is mostly for the things you can't interact with in the first place, or that are less important to the story. And during my playthrough, I barely came across any bugs at all, if not only at the end of it. And since none of these were game breaking at all, it didn't take me long to be fully immersed inside this world. And thanks to the future patches and updates, we can also expect, like any VR game, that even these smaller bugs will be gone in no time, leaving you with a pretty damn polished experience directly from the start. Overall, the game's graphics, as well as the constant frame rate the game manages to pull off, is really pushing that XR2 Generation 2 chip to its maximum potential. I just hope that more VR games will take advantage and follow this example closely. On top of that, throughout the game, there was also always a suitable tense atmosphere that feels like it's lifted straight out of the comic books. And in combination with the great sound design that you can hear all around you, as well as the insane cast for its voice acting, it all adds up to make the game truly come to life. But let's talk about the combat, because this is where things get interesting, since in this game you'll be having some hand-to-hand combat and a lot of it as well. But the way it is implemented is pretty intuitive. For example, you will first have to make a fist by squeezing the grip and trigger button while looking into the direction of your target. And once the hand icon appears, when you punch towards it, you will make an instant leap and smash them right in the face. After which follow-up attacks will be indicated by directional arrows. This can go from hooks to a series of well-placed attacks in front of you, or a two-hand combination. That also means that you'll have to throw those punches correctly if you want to take out your opponent. And at the same time, there will also be some other bad guys that try to attack you while you're at it. And this you can easily see by the blue hand on either side of your view, giving you as a player the opportunity to quickly react and hit your opponent off screen or block their punches altogether. And of course, a lot of other cool options and combinations become available as you unlock them further in the game. But what I found by far the coolest feature is that you can use your vision goggles to get additional information on your enemies. This goes from the weapons that they have to their emotion and even their heart rate, which kind of feels really cool and futuristic. But the only downside is that while you have a lot of tools at your disposal, you will often see your targets have some cool weapons themselves, like for example baseball bats and clubs. But sadly, some of these cannot be interacted with. However, while the combat might take some getting used to, once it does click, it feels great and fluent throughout each encounter. And there is also enough enemy variation to keep things interesting. But that gets us to the comfort, because this entire experience can get quite intense. That means that new people can experience something like motion sickness when in the heat of battle, since a lot of movements will require you to jump or grapple hook to a higher location. Luckily, there are a lot of options in the settings menu to adjust for this. This can go from presets to adding in vignettes when you're falling, or you can change the type of turning and the amount when using your thumbsticks, letting the player completely tweak it to what you feel most comfortable with. And even with all that, it is still possible that your body might still have to get used to VR a bit, especially since for a lot of people, this game comes included with their Quest headset, which means it will be probably one of the first titles you dive into. So in that case, don't forget to give yourself the proper time to adjust to it. Which gets us to the final conclusion. Batman Arkham Shadow is the exclusive VR game from Meta that finally brings the full experience into virtual reality. And it is even so good that it easily becomes one of the best VR games that the Quest Store has to offer. And on top of that, Arkham Shadows is feeling faithful to its flat screen counterparts, while innovating in its own way when played in VR. This goes from the incredibly satisfying combat to the detective mode that feels natural for first-person gameplay. And while the entire game might not be as long as some open world titles, it is still one of the must-play VR games that you can get, especially if you already own a Quest headset. But that's not all, because there are also some other must-play VR games. So click on the video that you see on screen right now to make sure you don't miss out. And of course, stay awesome.